What's up everybody, it's Tomasz here. I have here Arduino MEGA board. Using that board, I'm going to show you today how to use one of the most interesting concepts of embedded systems, which is interrupt. But before we continue, don't forget to click subscribe. So let's start. What is an interrupt? If you are running a code and there is some signal indicating event that requires immediate handling, so microcontroller pauses the code and gives control to a special interrupt handler function. After this function is completed, the code is resumed. The interrupt signal may come from outside of the system using microcontroller pin or from the inside. So in this tutorial, we'll focus on signals coming from inside the controller. We will use timer as a source of interrupts. This is a basic code structure, so we see here setup function that is configuring the built-in LED as output and also is setting up interrupt. This function we will soon complete. And there's a loop, which of course is doing nothing, only looping. In setup interrupt function, I'm configuring the timer. There is a special register, this is TCCR, which is controlling the counter. And first we are turning CTC mode. CTC means that the counter will reset to 0 after each interrupt is generated. So you don't have to do anything, simply handle this interrupt and the counter will be running from 0 again. And the second parameter is prescaler, since system clock in Arduino MEGA is 16 MHz. So it may be not necessary to use that if you don't need high frequency interrupts. In my case, I decided to use prescaler by 8, which means that the clock after the prescaler will be 2 MHz. And with that speed, the counter will count. Then we should initialize the counter value, which is here. And this register is very important because it's setting the comparison value each time when the counter, which is TCNT, will get to that value, that will generate interrupt. And also here we are defining the behavior of the system, so that when there is the value, the same value in the counter and in this match register, it generates interrupt. In general, before working on interrupts, you should always start with switching off interrupts, and you can switch them on when you are done with that. There is a function here which is handling the interrupt, but it's empty. So let me define it. Our timer configuration triggers interrupt 1000 times per second. So I defined a code that is triggering LED. So there is a counter here inside this interrupt function, and each time this interrupt is triggered, so it's counting up, and when we reach 1000, that means after 1 second, that will switch the LED off, and when it reaches 2000, it's switching on and resetting counter. So effectively that means that LED will blink. Let's check how it works. Okay, as we see, the LED is really blinking. I want to remind that this is not affecting operation of our main loop, which is now simply looping. We can do something with that. Now when we have this interrupt running, we may want to control what's going on within this interrupt. So let's assume that we want to dynamically modify those values here. So instead of constants, we should use some variable. So I replace constant with the global variable switch timer. This variable is defined as a volatile because otherwise it won't be accessible inside interrupt function. And we can now control the behavior of this interrupt function by controlling this global variable. So let's modify our loop. What is going now? We are changing this switch timer variable, which is controlling the frequency of blinking LED. We are doing this in a loop with some delay, so we can observe the lower frequency for 2 seconds and higher frequency for 2 seconds. Let's check how it works. As we can see, something is wrong with our code. That's because we've got to remember the interrupt comes with the frequency of 1000 Hertz and it's independent on our loop. So it may also happen that we change the switch timer to a lower value, so in this case to 60, while the counter inside our interrupt function is already higher than 60, and then it will never meet this condition here. To solve this issue, it's very easy. We change this condition and it should work now. As you can see, the code is running properly now. I think that this simple tutorial will let you start your own work with interrupts. That's it for today. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.